Rose's seminar, Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar Series. We're now recording, so everyone who's here, please do be aware that we're recording. This will later be put on YouTube, so you'll be able to share this and view it back later. This is the fourth talk. We've been delighted to welcome a number of high-profile speakers so far to the event, and we carry on today with Bernd Frick presenting his work on show jumping. Bernd Frick is a professor of economics at the University of Paderborn, and Bernd, the floor is yours. Enja, co-author, will be chairing the session. If you do have any kinds of questions, please write them in the chat on the side, and Enja will field questions. Enja is the real expert, so I'm told, on show jumping, and so she can even correct Bernd when he goes wrong. So please do ask questions in there for clarification. And what we'll try and do is we'll try and park more substantive questions for the end of the seminar. Bernd will talk for a period of time, up to about an hour, and then we'll spend some time with the Q&A session. But for now, if you can mute your microphones and ask questions in the conversation, that will be fantastic. And so, Bernd, please do take away the virtual floor.
Thanks a lot, James. Thanks for organizing this wonderful event. I'm happy to have you all on board today. So where is it? Title of today's presentation is Competition Format, Prize Money and Self-Selection, Empirical Evidence from Show Jumping. If you like the presentation, Enja has done a great job. If you don't like it, blame it on me. This is joint work with Enja Herdejürgen. Enja is a master's student at the University of Paderborn and an active writer herself. And this presentation is the product of a seminar paper she wrote last year in my sports economics class. What will we do in this presentation? Clearly, there is an undisputed consensus in the sports economics literature that incentives matter. That's trivial. The higher the prize money, the better the participants' performance. However, there's at least one important question that has not yet been completely or convincingly answered. Is this observable increase in performance due to more effort being expended by the competitors, or are more able athletes entering the competition if we increase the prize money? And moreover, when the stakes are really high, even high ability athletes have been found to choke under pressure. There's well-established literature on choking under pressure. The most recent publication I can highly recommend in this context is by Alex Krumer and a co-author, where they use biathlon data and find that in races at home, in their home country, male and female athletes equally seem to choke under pressure, perform worse compared to their potential or to their abilities. So the goals of our paper are twofold. First, we distinguish the selection effects of tournaments from their incentive effects. And second, we show that a deterioration of the individual's performance when the stakes are getting higher is not necessarily due to choking under pressure. We use data from show jumping, a sport that perhaps most of you are not very familiar with. I'm not either. And we use data from the last 3 seasons before and the first 7 seasons after a significant change in the competition format. I come to the 2 different formats in a minute, and the data set we use 2 data sets. The first one includes about 1,000 athlete year or rider year observations. We seek to answer the question whether and to what extent the introduction of a different competition format, which is called Grand Slam, has an impact on the performance of the athletes. What does Grand Slam mean? This format provides additional prize money to the winner of 2 or even 3 consecutive events in the world's most lucrative and prestigious show jumping events. And these 3 events take place every single year in Aachen, in Germany, Geneva, Switzerland, and Spruce Meadows in Canada. That's, if I'm correctly informed, close to Calgary. And what we find is that this Grand Slam format resulted in an increase in the average quality of the starters, and how we measure the average quality of the starters will become clear in a few minutes. Under the new format, prize purses have on average more than doubled, and an athlete is now entitled to receive an additional bonus on top of the prize money for a particular event. In case he or she wins 2 consecutive events, the bonus is 500,000, and in case of 3 consecutive wins, the bonus increases to 1 million euro. And our findings suggest, as you will see, in line with tournament theory, that contests have indeed the anticipated self-selection effect. So that means in case the number of starters is limited, an increase in the prize money combined with additional bonus payments awarded for a repeated outstanding performance leads to an increase in the quality of the entire field, because now more able athletes have a more pronounced incentive to participate in a particular event. How do we measure the average quality of the field? Well, during every single year, riders accumulate world ranking points, and the higher the number of points, the better their position in the final ranking at the end of the year. And the quality of the field as measured by the ranking points in the previous season of the participants in a particular event has increased significantly following the introduction of the Grand Slam, while at the same time the heterogeneity of the field, as measured by the coefficient of variation of the world ranking points in the previous season, has considerably decreased. You will see that in a few minutes. What is really surprising, at least for us, is that the performance of the athletes is completely unaffected by the increase in prize money. So recall, the quality of the riders increases, but their performance remains more or less the same. This can be explained by choking under pressure, but we hope to convince you that another explanation is far more plausible in this context. I jump most of the slides where I talk about tournament theory because, given today's audience, I think this is not necessary. But you all know that the predictions that emerge from tournament theory have been tested in a number of sports-related settings, individual sports, team sports. To the best of our knowledge, we are the first to use data from show jumping. A few papers have used data from flat races, from horse races. The literature goes back to the turn of the century, a paper by Metcalf and co-author, where they looked at the performance of jockeys under different types of contract. And this paper has recently been used by Rob Simmons and the Butler brothers to extend the literature. I have no idea how far they are in the meantime with that. So horse jumping is clearly an under-researched area. In Germany, horse racing or show jumping is, from an economic point of view, not a particularly important sport, but that's clearly different in other countries such as the UK or in the rich countries in Asia. Again, I jumped these slides. So what we are going to do is we test the self-selection effect of prize money and prize money increases by analyzing the impact of a change in competition format in professional show jumping, composition of the field, and the performance of the athletes before and after the change in the competition format. And now comes the difficult part for me, and I hope that Enja jumps in whenever I start talking nonsense. So under the old format, riders were nominated or invited to an event. They could refuse to accept the invitation without any consequences. A Grand Prix of show jumping consists of several events, and the final day of a Grand Prix is the event that we will look at. So during the course of an event, riders collect points according to their rankings in the other competitions of that event, and an ex-ante fixed number of riders with the highest number of points qualifies for the Grand Prix, and it's usually around 40 starters in the first round. So this Grand Prix is designed as a competition with either one round and a jump off or 2 rounds and a jump off. Any faults occurring during the course are penalized with penalty points. And well, there are 2 types of faults that can occur. In one case, a horse hits a bar and it falls down, or the rider exceeds the maximum time allowed to complete the course. So these penalty points are aggregated, and the rider with the lowest aggregate number of penalty points wins. If 2 riders finish with the same number of penalty points, the one with the fastest time is ranked higher, and the prize money is, as always, distributed according to the final overall ranking. These are the 3 events that we are particularly interested in. And the new format was introduced in 2013 at the then 3 major events of show jumping. And this is sponsored by watch manufacturer Rolex, and therefore it's called the Rolex Grand Slam of show jumping. Aachen, Geneva, and Spruce Meadows. And in 2018, the Dutch Masters in Hertogenbosch was added to that series, but we have so far not included the data from the Dutch Masters into the data sets. The bonus payments for riders who manage to win at least 2 of the respective Grand Prix. If you win 3 consecutively, you are entitled to receive a 1 million euro bonus. If you win 2 Grand Prix consecutively, the bonus is 500,000. And if you win 2 not consecutively, it's 250,000. And it's a continuous system. It's not bound to competitions that take place in the same year. So if you win the last Grand Prix in 2019 and the first in 2020, you are entitled to a 500,000 euro bonus. And apart from the bonus payments, the prize money was massively increased in the respective Grand Prix in 2013 or in 2014, as we will see in a minute. Here you have the development of the prize money in the Grand Slam show jumping events in 1,000 euros. So the highest prize money is paid in Spruce Meadows. It's about 2.1 million euros that go to the top finishers, and the orange bars is the prize money in Geneva, and the blue bars is the prize money in Aachen. And as you can see, there were two major changes. In 2013, the Grand Slam was introduced, but Geneva and Spruce Meadows retained their previous level of prize money, while Aachen immediately increased the prize money from 400,000 to 1 million euros. And in 2014, Spruce Meadows increased to about 1.3 million. And in 2015, finally, also Geneva increased prize money to more than 1 million. Aachen has remained stable over the last 7 years, while especially Spruce Meadows has increased the prize money considerably since 2016. And here you see the distribution of prize money in 2019. By far the largest part of the pie goes to the winner. The distribution is less unequal than compared to many other individual sports. When you look at data from professional golf or tennis, the prize money distributions are far more concentrated at the top ranks. And here you see how the structure of the competition has changed over the years. We have 3 different regimes in 2010, 11, and 12. The Grand Slam had not been introduced yet, and the prize money was quite low, and that applies to Aachen, Geneva, and Spruce Meadows in the same way. In 2013, the Grand Slam was introduced, but only Aachen increased the prize money immediately, while it remained low in Geneva for 2013, 2014, and in Spruce Meadows for 2013, sorry. And since 2015, it's high everywhere. And we use these 3 different types of regime to analyze self-selection of the athletes. To give you a first idea, the blue line is the distribution of world ranking points in the previous seasons of the riders participating in these 3 events. And as you can see, it's clearly a bimodal distribution. Under the new format, this distribution is coming closer to a unimodal distribution, yet it's not completely symmetrical. But the average number of World Cup points of the riders participating in an event under the old format was 1,488. Under the new format, it's 110 points higher, while the standard deviation decreased from more than 900 to less than 800, and the coefficient of variation decreased from 62 to 48. And that's statistically highly significant. So the first descriptive evidence suggests that under the new format, the quality of the field is, first of all, higher, and second, the heterogeneity is lower. In this first regression model, you see 2 estimations. The dependent variable is the world ranking points in the previous year. And you can see if from model 1, controlling for everything else, the number of world ranking points per starter increased by 400 under the Grand Slam. If we distinguish between the 2 types of Grand Slam with the low and the high prize money, there's again a considerable difference. It's 350 points higher when the prize money remained low, but the Grand Slam was introduced, and it's now 399 under the high prize money regime and the Grand Slam. And there are controls for the location of the event. Why is the number of world ranking points of the athletes in Spruce Meadows significantly lower than in Aachen and Geneva? That's pretty easy to explain. Most of the world's elite riders live in Europe, and travel costs are high if you go to Canada. So in Spruce Meadows, there are more North American riders at the start, and these are not always as competitive as the European riders, elite riders who simply cannot afford to fly to Canada. Season dummies included, and you see it's 959 observations, and it's a fixed effects estimation, and the standard errors are clustered at the athlete ID. So first finding is, yes, the quality of the field increases significantly after the change in the competition format. What happens with the performance of the athletes? Here you see the penalties in the first round. Again, remember, it's either a one-round event with a jump-off or a two-round event with a jump-off. We have restricted our analysis to penalties in the first round only, because only the top performers are allowed to start in the second round. And what you can see is that the introduction of the Grand Slam had no impact whatsoever on the number of penalties accumulated by individual athletes in the first round. So the performance of the athletes remained the same under the new as compared to the old format. And when we again distinguish the Grand Slam regime between high and low prize money periods, this again yields a completely insignificant result. Why do we have 1,068 observations here and 959 in the previous estimation? Well, here we include in the observation also athletes for whom either no world ranking points are available. This is a small number of observations. I'll come back to that in a minute. And we include here data from the year 2010. And for 2010, the world ranking points are not available for all the athletes. So here we have observations from an earlier period of time. When we restrict the data to, or when we exclude the 2010 events, the results remain virtually identical, as you can see. And when we exclude the athletes for whom in the years 2011 to 2019, no world ranking points are available. These are 5 athletes only. As you can see, 964 versus 959. Again, the results are completely robust. So our main findings are pretty easy to summarize. Following a change in competition format, rider quality in major show jumping events increased significantly, while their performance remained constant. How can we reconcile these conflicting results? We see 2 competing explanations. Perhaps you guys have additional ideas. First of all, it could be due to choking under pressure. And second, this could be due to stochastic variations in performance. Remember, in show jumping, we have 2 athletes performing jointly, a rider and a horse, and it's not completely unplausible to assume that stochastic variations in performance are more likely to occur if two athletes interact than in case you have just one athlete performing. We not only favor the latter hypothesis, but have already found some, as we think, compelling evidence. What have we done? Well, in order to measure the inconsistency of a rider-horse combination throughout the years, we collected an extensive data set, including the performance of riders at other events than the 3 Grand Slam competitions that we have analyzed here so far. Our data set, our second data set includes only competitions that are classified as equally difficult as the Grand Slam competitions. And in international show jumping, the difficulty of a competition is defined by the height of the obstacles and the technical difficulty of the course. And these competitions are categorized by FEI, that's the International Show Jumpers Federation, into levels that are determined by the prize money available at the respective event. And the levels are indicated by a star rating ranging from 1 to 5 stars, and the maximum prize money at a 1-star event is 42,000, while the minimum prize money at the 5-star event is 423,000 euros. Since the Grand Prix of Aachen, Spruce Meadows and Geneva are all 5-star events with an obstacle height of about 1.60 meters, only Grand Prix and World Cup events in other places are included in our dataset if they are also classified as 5-star events with an obstacle height of about 1.60 meters. So controlling for the performance requirements of the different competitions, we measure the consistency or inconsistency of the different rider-horse combinations appearing in the most difficult and most prestigious tournaments in show jumping. A rider can appear with different horses, and therefore we have to control for different rider-horse combinations. So many of the elite riders have 2, 3, in few cases even 4 horses that they take with them to these events. But the performance requirements are never completely identical and can even differ at the same location over the years. The course design is always slightly different, and external factors like weather conditions can also affect the difficulty of a course. Enja will certainly remember which of these events take place under a roof and which are outdoor events. And again, these factors are likely to make a difference. Most importantly, however, the performance requirements differ according to the layout of the location that is hosting the event. Typically, indoor show jumping arenas are smaller than outdoor arenas, with the consequence that indoor courses are shorter, but require a higher level of technical performance, while outdoor courses are longer and are taken at a higher average speed. And this clearly requires more stamina and endurance by the horse, not necessarily by the rider. So the basic performance requirements are the same or very similar, and therefore the performance at the different Grand Prix and World Cup tournaments is, in our view, comparable. Nearly all the competitions and meeting the requirements mentioned above that took place between 2011 and 2019 are included in the data set, with some exceptions due to a lack of data availability. And the data were retrieved by Enja from the Jumping Events online archive of FEI. And the dataset includes nearly 18,000 rider-horse competitions that appear at least 5 times in Grand Prix and World Cup events. So we excluded all rider horse combinations that appeared 1, 2, 3, or 4 times only, because in our view it doesn't make sense to calculate inconsistency in performance with less than 5 observations. Our main finding here is that even elite riders are rather inconsistent in their performance. The standard deviation of the mean penalty points in the first round of the most prestigious jumping events in the years 2011 through 2019 is always significantly higher than the within, than the between these combinations. So to give you an idea of what we have done here, we have all rider-horse combinations that appeared at least 5 times in the Grand Prix events or in the World Cup events. And this gives us 13,000 observations. It's 1,329 rider-horse combinations. And the mean of penalty points in the first round is 11.7. The standard deviation between rider-horse combinations is 10.6, and the standard deviation within rider-horse combinations is 20. So it's much higher than the between rider-horse combinations. And if we reduce the data set to include only those rider-horse combinations that we observe at least 10 times, that's 657 combinations and more than 10,000 observations. The between standard deviation goes down to 7.9, while the within rider-horse combination standard deviation goes down to 19.7 only. The results are virtually identical if we look at the World Cup events, and if we aggregate World Cup and Grand Prix events, we have these nearly 18,000 observations that I mentioned a few seconds ago. Summary: following a change in competition format, rider quality in major show jumping events increased significantly while their performance remained constant. This unexpected result is not due to choking under pressure, in our view, but due to stochastic variations in performance. What are our next steps? Well, first of all, we will reduce the second large data set to include only riders for whom World Cup ranking points are available. Anecdotal evidence and visual inspection of the data suggest that the elite riders are equally prone to making mistakes than the non-elite riders in the sample. And second, in order to back up our hypotheses that these findings are due to stochastic variation in performance and not to choking under pressure, I've started to assemble a data set with the performance of athletes in different track and field disciplines. So the data is available from athletics.org. I've just compiled a data set that includes the performance of male and female 100-meter sprinters over 8 or 9 years. And here you see clearly that the variation in performance is a small fraction of the variation in performance that we observe among riders. I'll stop here. Thanks for your attention. I'm looking forward to your comments and even more forward to your suggestions on how to improve the paper. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bernd. We can move now into a period of open discussion, Q&A. Enja, I don't know if there are any of the questions that were posed during the talk that you might want to raise with Bernd ahead of that.
Yeah, there was one question or one hint. Alexander Kuma pointed out that we may have looked into the differences between women and men, since those are or women and men are competing together in the same competitions, that there may be differing effects for the two genders.
Can I reply to that?
Of course.
Okay.
So initially we had not included a gender dummy in the estimations. I have in the meantime added that variable to the data set. We don't find any gender effects, nothing at all. And of course, I'm not surprised that Alex asked that question. No, there's no gender specific effect to be found.
Yeah, maybe as an additional hint regarding to the gender question, I guess in show jumping, there are, at least when it comes to performance, no gender effects, because the performance itself does not entirely depend on physical abilities. So a rider does not have to be stronger or physically stronger to be better in show jumping, or have more endurance also. And therefore, women are not or are able to show the same performance as men. And therefore, since they are on a quite equal basis, when it comes to performance, there is no observable difference between men and women.
And the percentage of women is surprisingly high. So it's about 25% or something like that. I was surprised to see that. You may not have been surprised to hear that.
Okay. So there were some questions regarding the point system or the ranking system, and I'm rather slow in typing, so I hope that I answered all the questions. But maybe to make this clear, when it comes to the world ranking points, which was the basis on which we measured rider quality, those are independent from the Grand Slam or anything. They are like a seasonal rating where a rider gets a certain amount of points based on the ranking he gets in all competitions he takes part in. So for each ranking in the competition, a rider gets a set amount of points, which is higher if he wins, a lower number if he's second, and so on and so on. And therefore, the riders accumulate these world ranking points over the whole season, or over the course of a whole season. And therefore, if they scored very well in the whole season and they ranked very high in each of the competitions, they will have a very high number of world ranking points. And if they scored rather low in most of the competitions, they will have a lower number of world ranking points. And therefore, the world ranking points, or the overall world ranking points of a rider in the previous season, is a rather valid hint at the quality of the rider itself, because it shows how well he performed during the last season. Okay, I hope this answers most of the questions regarding the points. Okay, Alexander Kumar asked about home advantage. Should I answer this question, Bernd?
Yes, please.
Okay, so home advantage is not typically observed when it comes to show jumping. So a few people say, okay, they like starting in their home country or something, but there's nothing like a home advantage when it comes to the stadiums, for example. The riders are not more used to any stadium or show jumping arena at their home country than at others, because these are certain locations that are only used for this one competition in a year, so the riders cannot go there to train or anything. And when it comes to the support from the fans, it's rather equal. So in show jumping, everyone is very, very friendly, if we say so. So the crowd will be cheering for everyone from their home country or from elsewhere. So there's no typically a home advantage. I hope this answers the question.
Are there large crowds at these events, presumably?
Yeah, there are very large crowds, like especially in Aachen. I think, Bernd, you showed a picture of the stadium very, very shortly. Mm-hmm. Like in Aachen, there's a huge outdoor arena, and the riding field is about the size of 2 football fields. And it has the large stadium there, and it's always very crowded. So there are large crowds in show jumping. It's actually very popular in even in Germany. So there are always a lot of people looking.
Mm. How are the penalties incurred? Are they automatic, or are they given by some umpire or referee or something?
So they are in general automatic. So we have judges, but these are only there to control if a penalty occurs. Because if a penalty in show jumping occurs, it's very obvious. So they are the obstacles that the rider and horse combinations have to jump over, and either they knock it down, and everybody can see that the obstacle got knocked down, then it's 4 penalty points, or the horse refuses to jump the obstacle, that's also a penalty or penalized with 4 points, or rider or horse fall down or anything. So this is like the penalty point system, and there are judges to control and to check, but it's very obvious if a point occurs.
I've jumped in, by the way. There's a number of questions in the conversation that we should address.
I'm reading it right now. So. Okay, so Julio asked, what about controlling for the fact that the difficulty could be different? Sometimes the same director make very different competitions. Besides, the weather could have a role if it rains. Yes, of course, the difficulty always varies slightly. So we have weather conditions, especially in Spruce Meadows and Aachen, since these are the 2 outdoor conditions. And of course, the course design differs slightly from year to year. We are controlling for this with the fixed effects for the events. And moreover, the variance in difficulty is rather small, since these are all at the same difficulty level. So each of these competitions is a 5-star competition with an obstacle height of 1.60 meters. So the general difficulty is rather consistent, even if there are small changes here. Do you want to add to that, Bernd?
Yeah, Enja, until a few years ago, obstacle height was much higher than 1.60 meters. Was the obstacle height reduced to criticisms from the public? Because I have seen articles here and there that, first of all, horse doping was a problem. I don't know whether it remains to be one. And second, people were afraid that the horses got injured by jumping too high. And I remember as a teenager that I have seen events where obstacle height was close to 2 meters.
When or to what time do you refer? Since when do you mean the obstacles are restricted to 1.60 meters?
So 30, 40 years ago, obstacles were much higher.
Yeah. So show jumping has evolved quite a bit, since in itself it's a rather dangerous sport compared to others, because of course you have a rather high velocity and rather high obstacles, and there is a large possibility or probability for accidents to happen. And a few years ago, actually, the obstacles were much higher, and they were a lot or much sturdier. So it was a lot harder to knock them down. And this actually led to a very high number in accidents, and some of them even deadly. And therefore, certain restrictions have been made. So, for example, the obstacle height, and moreover, the obstacles have been designed to be safer. So it's way easier to knock them down, and they are not as heavy anymore. So if a rider, if the horse refuses to jump and the rider falls into the obstacle and the whole obstacle collapses over him, he is less likely to die now than he was a few years ago. So these are some restrictions. There are still competitions that are higher than 1.60 meters, but these are very special competitions that only include a few number of obstacles and are especially made for jumping as high as the horse can. But these are not, in general, international competitions. So now everything is restricted to 1.60 meters in high. It's 1.60 meters in high, and the width of the obstacles is up to 2 meters.
Okay.
So there are. Yeah, one, Georgios Nalbantas, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. He asked, the closer I am to the competition, the more likely I can bring more horses, or the less tired will be my horses. So I guess this refers to the home advantage again. So if the competition is closer to my home, I don't have to transport the horses over such a long distance, and they will not be as exhausted when they arrive at the competition. In these international competitions, we don't have these effects because actually the horses are brought to the location of the competitions weeks before the competition starts. So if the Spruce Meadows Masters in Calgary are scheduled, the German riders, for example, they fly their horses there about 3 weeks or 2 weeks at the latest in advance, so that the horses can acclimate to the new climate, to the new time zone. They can recover from the journey. So this is all planned and considered. So there is no real disadvantage from having to travel a large distance because the horses are not as tired. And regarding the question of how many horses one can bring to a competition, that's not really a question of distance, but more of resources. So not as many riders have enough horses or have a higher number of horses that are talented enough to compete in these competitions. And if they have, they can bring them. If not, they can they leave them at home. But in a Grand Slam or in the Grand Prix, you can start with only one horse either way. So it does not really matter how much horses you can bring to a competition. I hope this answers the question. Daniel Weimer asked, do riders have different horses? If yes, is there any change in the use of the best or second best choice horse after the changes? Were there any other changes in tandem with the Grand Slam changes? So first, yes, the riders do have different horses. They have actually, like the very good riders, have at least 4 or 5 horses that are able to compete at their difficulties, which they may choose of. We controlled for that actually. I don't know, maybe you may refer to that because we checked for the high rider horse combinations. Yeah, but there are, so regarding the selection of the horses, we did not see any changes in tandem with the Grand Slam change. So it might be possible to observe that after the Grand Slam was implemented, the riders choose to bring their better horses, but we have not yet controlled for that yet because it's rather difficult to control for the quality of the horse, since this changes widely with the rider. I hope this answers. Okay. Okay, so Coach Andreas Tova asked, can there be some kind of shirking? Maybe if jumpers can potentially compete for victory in all tournaments, they choose not, maybe sponsors competing out of injury, not happy with the horse, had to compete in other competitions, recently maybe far away, and so on. Yes, it is possible, but yeah, to a rather low extent. So yes, the riders may choose to compete or not compete in a competition or to hold back their performance for various reasons, but in general, it is rather difficult to do so during a show jumping course, and the incentive there are, from the experience, rather low. Then there was a question, given the difference between Europe and Canada, are the results robust to excluding the North American event? Bernd, do you maybe want to answer that?
I have not tried that so far, but I can easily re-estimate the model just using the data from Aachen and Geneva. I would be surprised to find any differences, because we do control for location with a dummy, and therefore it's unlikely that the results will be significantly different when we leave out Spruce Meadows. So the number of mistakes in Spruce Meadows is significantly higher than in both Geneva and Aachen, while the number of World Cup points accumulated by the individual riders is not significantly different, controlling for Grand Slam regime. So this just points to the fact that the course in Spruce Meadows might be more difficult for elite as well as for non-elite riders. But I can easily check that in the data.
Yeah, the course in Spruce Meadows it's longer. It's the field is rather large, so the riders and the rider-horse combinations have to take a longer distance in the course, and I guess that's what leads to the change there. So the difficulty itself is the same, but it's just a longer course, and due to endurance reasons, this may lead to the higher penalties there. Okay. I hope I have not skipped any questions. Is there anyone whose questions I have not yet answered?
Yeah, if you want to ask any more questions, please either ask them in the chat or feel free to unmute your microphones as well. Are there no events in America? Just the one in Canada? Is that all there is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for the Grand Slam, it's only this one. So there are, of course, a lot more show jumping events in America. There are actually quite a lot. But for the Grand Slam, it's only the one.
Can I ask something here?
Yep. Go on, Rob.
So, are there some national, international competitions? I'm thinking of Olympics, stuff like that. And don't these riders and horses compete in those competitions, but may not necessarily get the same rewards?
Well,
you could control for that.
There are European championships, world championships in show jumping. And I think the elite riders that we observe in the 3 Grand Prix events have a high probability to participate in world and European championships too, right?
Yeah, they have. So it's basically, it's about the equality of the starters. And of course, the more able riders, as we have shown, are more likely to participate in the Grand Slam. And of course, those are the ones who are more likely to be selected for or to participate in the European World Championships or in the Olympics. But maybe it's interesting to point at in this context. Riders are able to choose if they want to participate in an event or in a competition, and even if they want to participate in a World Championship. And recently, there was an incident where a rider was selected by the national trainer to participate in the World Championship, and he declined because he rather wanted to save the strength of his horse in order to participate in the Grand Slam in Calgary. So he had the opportunity to compete in the World Championship, and he had the chance to win there because he was very, very good in the season. But he'd rather go to Calgary and participate in the Grand Slam there, and then to go to the World Championship. So maybe this stresses the importance this event or this Grand Slam event has for the riders. Julio Florentino asked, what about the difference in the strategy concerning the time? If you are more focused being quick for some reason, the number of points should increase. Could it explain anything? Yes, so there is the issue of time in the events, but only in the jump off or in the last round. So naturally, if the rider chooses to be quicker in the course, it is more likely to, or he's more likely to make any faults when competing. But in our paper, we are only looking at the first round. So a Grand Prix consists of 1 or 2 rounds and the jump off, and the first round or the second round are only to qualify for the jump off. So you qualify for the jump off if you have 0 penalty points in the first rounds. And then the jump off is against the clock. But the priority of the riders in the first round is actually to not have any penalties, and therefore they are not as quick, or their strategy is not to be as fast as possible. Their strategy in this first round is to have as few penalties as possible. And therefore, since we are only looking at this first round where time is not really an issue, except when you exceed the time allowed, I think that this is not a major effect here. Okay, are there more questions?
Alex was giving you a reference to chase up there as well in the economic journal.
Oh yeah.
On the horse paper.
Great, thank you. That's very good.
Well, assuming there are no more questions, it's left for me to thank Bernd and Enja for what's been a really fascinating presentation, really interesting, learning about a sport that perhaps isn't often covered by sports economists or economists more generally. So thank you very, very much for that. Thank you for taking part in this becoming more usual format for research seminars as we're all locked down in our various locations around the world. Thank you again, and we'll meet again this time next week, 2:30 next week, when Ruud Koning will present the next Roses seminar. So once again, thank you very much, everybody. Trust you all have a good weekend and stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks again for organizing this, James.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bernd, for taking part, and Enja.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.